Chapter 3 of Stand By for Mars. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Sean O'Hara. Stand By for Mars by Carey Rockwell. Chapter 3. I just can't understand it, Joan, said Captain Steve Strong, tossing the paper on his circular desk. The psychographs of Corbett, Manning, and Astro fit together like gears. And yet... The Solar Guard officer suddenly rose and walked over to a huge window that filled the entire north wall of his office. A solid sheet of glass that extended from the high dome ceiling to the translucent flooring. Through the window, he stared moodily down towards the grassy quadrangle, where at the moment several hundred cadets were marching in formation under a hot sun. And yet, continued Strong, every morning for the last 3 weeks I've got a report from McKenny about some sort of friction between them. I think it'll work out, Steve, answered the pretty girl in the uniform of the Solar Guard, seated in an easy chair on the other side of the desk. Joan Dale held the distinction of being the first woman ever admitted into the Solar Guard in a capacity other than administrative work. Her experiments in atomic fissionables was the subject of a recent scientific symposium held on Mars. Over 50 of the leading scientists of the Solar Alliance had gathered to study her latest theory on hyperdrive, and had unanimously declared her ideas valid. She had been offered the chair as Master of Physics at the Academy as a result, giving her access to the finest laboratory in Tri-Planet Society. Now facing the problem of personality adjustment in Unit 42D, she sat across the desk from her childhood friend, Steve Strong, and frowned. What's happened this time? Manning. He paused. It seems to be all Manning. You mean he's more aggressive of the three? No, not necessarily. Corbett shows signs of being a number one spaceman, and that big cadet, Astro. Strong flashed a white smile that contrasted with his deep space tan. I don't think he could make a manual mistake on the power deck if he tried. You know, I actually saw him put an auxiliary rocket motor together blindfolded. The pretty scientist smiled. I could have told you that after one look at his classification tests. How? On the questions concerning the power deck operation, he was letter perfect. And on the others, astrogation and control deck, he just skimmed by. But even where the problem involved fuel, power, supply of energy, he offers some very practical answers to the problem. She smiled. Astro is just as much an artist on that power deck as Liddy Tamal doing Juliet in the stereos. Yes, mused Strong. And Corbett is the same on the control deck. Good instinctive intelligence. That boy soaks up knowledge like a sponge. Facile mind, quick to grasp the essentials. She smiled again. Seems to me I remember a few years back when a young lieutenant successfully put down a mutiny in space, and at his promotion to captain, the citation included the fact that he was quick to grasp the essentials. Strong grinned sheepishly. A routine flight to Titan had misfired into open rebellion by the crew. Using a trick picked up in ancient history books of sea-roving pirates in the 17th century, he had joined the mutiny, gained control of the ship, sought out the ringleaders, and restored discipline. And Manning, asked Strong. What about Manning? One of the hardest, brightest minds I've come across in the Academy. He has a brain like a steel trap. He never misses. And do you think he's acting up because Corbett is a nominal head of the unit? Does he feel that he should be the command cadet in the control deck instead of Corbett? No, replied Dr. Dale, not at all. I'm sure he intentionally missed problems about control deck and command in his classification test. He concentrated on astrogation, communications, and signal radar. He wanted to be assigned to the radar deck, and he turned in the best paper I've ever read from a cadet to get the post. Strong threw up his hands. Then what is it? Here we have a unit, on paper at least, that could be number one, a good combination of brains, experience, and knowledge. Everything that's needed. And what is the result? Friction. Suddenly a buzzer sounded, and on Steve Strong's desk a small teleceiver screen glowed into life. Gradually the stern face of Commander Walters emerged. Sorry to disturb you, Steve. Can you spare me a minute? Of course, Commander, replied Strong. Is anything wrong? Very wrong, Steve. I've been looking over the daily performance reports on Unit 42D. Dr. Dale and I have just been discussing that situation, sir. A relieved expression passed over the commander's face. Good. I wanted to get your opinion before I broke up the unit. No, sir, said Strong quickly. Don't do that. Oh? Replied the commander. On the screen he could be seen settling back into his chair. And why not? Well, Joan, or Dr. Dale and myself, feel that the boys of Unit 42D make it potentially the best in the Academy, if they stay together, sir. Walters considered this for a moment, and then asked thoughtfully, Give me one good reason why the unit shouldn't be washed out. The Academy needs boys like these, sir, Steve answered flatly. Needs their intelligence, their experience. They may be a problem now, but if they're handled right, they'll turn out to be ace spacemen. The commander interrupted. You're pretty sold on them, aren't you, Steve? Yes, sir, I am.
You know, tomorrow all units will be assigned to their personal instructors.
Yes, sir. I've selected Lieutenant Volchek for this unit. He's tough and smart. I think he's just the man for the job.
I don't agree, Steve. Volchek is a fine officer, and with any other unit, there'd be no question. I think we have a better man for the job.
Whom do you suggest, sir? The commander leaned forward in his chair.
You, Steve.
Me?
What do you think, Joan?
I wanted to make the same suggestion, Commander, smiled Joan, but I didn't know if Steve really wanted the assignment.
Well, what about it, Steve?
Asked the commander.
This is no reflection on your present work, but if you're so convinced that 42D is worth the trouble, then take them over and mold them into spacemen. Otherwise, I'll have to wash them out.
Strong hesitated a moment. All right, sir. I'll do my best. On the screen, the stern lines in Commander Walter's face relaxed, and he smiled approvingly.
Thanks, Steve,
he said softly.
I was hoping you'd say that. Keep me posted.
The screen blacked out abruptly, and Captain Strong turned to Joan Dale, a troubled frown wrinkling his brow. Huh, I really walked into that one, didn't I? He muttered. It isn't going to be easy, Steve, she replied. Easy? He snorted and walked over to the window to stare blankly at the quadrangle before. I'd almost rather try landing on the hot side of Mercury. It'd be icy compared to this situation. You can do it, Steve. I know you can. Joan moved to his side to place a reassuring hand on his arm. The Solar Guard officer didn't answer immediately. He kept on staring at the academy grounds and buildings spread out before him. When he finally spoke, his voice rang with determination. I've got to do it, Joan. I've got to whip those boys into a unit. Not only for their sakes, but for the sake of the academy. End of Chapter 3. Stand By for Mars by Carey Rockwell. Chapter 4. The first 3 weeks of an Earthworm's life at Space Academy are filled with never-ending physical training and conditioning to meet the rigors of rocket flight and life on distant planets. And under the grueling pressure of 14-hour days, filled with back-breaking exercises and long, forced marches, very few of the boys can find anything more desirable than sleep, and more sleep. Under this pressure, the friction in Unit 42D became greater and greater. Roger and Astro continually needled each other with insults, and Tom gradually slipped into the role of arbiter. Returning from a difficult afternoon of endless marching in the hot sun, with the prospect of an evening of free-fall wrestling before them, the 3 cadets dragged themselves wearily into the slide stairs leading up to their quarters, their muscles screaming for rest. Another day like this, began Astro listlessly, and I'm going to melt down to nothing. Doesn't McKinney have a heart? No, just an asteroid, Tom grumbled. He'll never know how close he came to getting a space boot in his face when he woke us up this morning. Ah, man, was I tired. Stop complaining, will ya? Snarled Roger. All I've heard from you 2 space crawlers is gripes and complaints. If I wasn't so tired, Roger, said Astro, I'd give you something to gripe about. Fat lip. Knock it off, Astro, said Tom wearily. The role of keeping them apart was getting tiresome. The trouble with you, Astro, pursued Roger, is that you think with your muscles instead of your head. Yeah, I know. And you've got an electronic calculator for a brain. All you have to do is push a button and get the answer all laid out for you. They had reached their quarters now and were stripping off their sweat-soaked uniforms in preparation for a cool shower. You know, Roger, continued Astro, you've got a real problem ahead of you. Any problem you think I have is no problem at all, was the cool reply. Yes, it is, insisted Astro. When you're ready for your first hop into space, you won't be able to make it. Why not? They don't have a space helmet in the Academy large enough to fit that overinflated head of yours. Roger turned slowly and spoke to Tom without looking at him. Close the door, Corbett. Why? Asked Tom, puzzled. Because I don't want any interruptions. I'm going to take that big hunk of Venusian space junk apart. Anything you say, you big-mouthed squirt, roared Astro. Hey, knock it off, yelled Tom, jumping between them and grabbing Astro's arm. If you guys don't lay off each other, you're going to be thrown out of the Academy, and I'll be thrown out with you. I'll be blasted if I'll suffer for your mistakes. That's a very interesting statement, Corbett. A deep voice purred in the doorway, and the 3 boys whirled to see Captain Strong walk into the room. His black and gold uniform fitting snugly around his shoulders betrayed his latent strength. Stand to, all of you. As the boys quickly snapped to attention, Strong eyed them slowly and then moved casually around the room. He picked up a book, looked out the window port, pushed a boot to one side, and, finally, removed Tom's sweat-stained uniform from a chair and sat down. The cadets held their rigid poses, back stiff, eyes looking straight ahead. Corbett, snapped Strong. Yes, sir? What was the meaning of that little speech I heard a moment ago? I don't quite understand what you mean, sir, stumbled Tom. I think you do, said Strong. I want to know what provoked you to make such a statement. I'd rather not answer that, sir. Don't get cute, Corbett, barked Strong. I know what's going on in this unit. We're Manning and Astro squaring off to fight. Yes, sir, replied Tom slowly. All right. Eddie is all of you, said Strong. The three boys relaxed and faced the officer. Manning, do you want to be a successful cadet here at the Academy? Yes, sir, answered Roger. Then why don't you act like it? Asked Strong. Is there something wrong with my work, sir? Tom recognized a smooth Manning confidence begin to appear, and he wondered if Captain Strong would be taken in. Everything's wrong with your work, barked Strong. You're too smart. Know too much. He stopped short and then added softly with biting sarcasm. Why do you know so much, Cadet Manning? Roger hesitated. I've studied very hard. Studied for years to become a space cadet, he replied. Just to be a cadet? Or a successful cadet and Solar Guard officer? To be successful at both, sir. Tell me, Manning, do you have any ideas on life? That's a pretty general question, sir. Do you mean life as a whole, or a specific part of life? They're fencing with each other, thought Tom. He held his breath as Strong-eyed the relaxed, confident cadet. A spaceman is supposed to have but one idea in life, Manning, and that idea is space. I see, sir, replied Roger as a faraway look came into his eyes. Yes, sir, I have some ideas about space. I'd like to hear them, requested Strong coldly. Very well, sir. Roger relaxed his shoulders and leaned against the bunk. I believe space is the last frontier of man, Earthman. It's the last place for man to conquer. It's the greatest adventure of all time, and I want to be part of that adventure. Thank you, Manning. Strong's voice was even colder than before. But as it happens, I can read too. That was a direct quote from the closing paragraph of John Buelliker's book on his trip to the stars. He paused. Couldn't think of anything original to say? Roger flushed and gritted his teeth. Tom could hardly keep himself from laughing. Captain Strong had scored heavily. Astro, where in the name of the universe did you get an idea you could be an officer in Solar Guard? I can handle anything with push in it, sir. Astro smiled his confidence. Know anything about hyperdrive? No, sir. Then you can't handle everything with, as you say, push in it, snapped Strong. No, sir, answered Astro, his face clouding over. There was a long moment of silence while Strong lifted one knee, swung it over the arm of his chair, and looked steadily at the two half-naked boys in front of him. He smiled lazily. Well, for two earthworms, you've certainly been acting like a couple of space aces. He let that soak in while he toyed with the gleaming Academy ring on his finger. He allowed it to flash in the light of the window port, then slipped it off his finger and flipped it over to Corbett. Know what that is? He asked the curly-haired cadet. Yes, sir, replied Tom. Your Academy graduation ring. Uh-huh. Now give it to our friend from Venus. Tom gingerly handed Astro the ring. Try it on, Astro, invited Strong. The big cadet tried it on all of his fingers, but couldn't get it past the first joint. Give it to Manning. Roger accepted the ring and held it in the palm of his hand. He looked at it with a hard stare, then dropped it in the outstretched hand of the Solar Guard officer. Placing it on his finger, Strong spoke casually. All units design their own rings. There are only 3 like this in the universe. One is drifting around in space on the finger of Sam Jones. Another is blasting a trail to the stars on the finger of Eddie Garcia. He held up his finger. This is the 3rd one. Strong got up and began to pace in front of the boys. Eddie Garcia couldn't speak a word of English when he first came to the Academy, and for 8 weeks Sam and I sweated to figure out what he was talking about. I think we spent over 100 hours in galley doing KP because Eddie kept fouling things up. But that didn't bother us because we were a unit. Unit 33V, class of 2338. Strong turned to face the silent cadets. Sam Jones was pretty much like you, Astro. Not as big, but with the same love of that power deck. He could always squeeze a few extra pounds of thrust out of those rockets. What he knew about astrogation and control, he could stick on the head of a pin. On long flights, he wouldn't even come up to the control deck. He just sat in the power hole singing loud, corny songs about the Arkansas mountains to those atomic motors. He was a real power deck man, but he was a unit man first. The only reason I'm here to tell you about it is because he never forgot the unit. He died saving Addie and myself. The room was still. Down the long hall, the lively chatter of other cadets could be heard as they showered and prepared for dinner. In the distance, the rumble of slidewalks and test firing of rockets at the spaceport was dim, subdued, powerful. The unit is the backbone of the Academy, continued Strong. It was set up to develop 3 men to handle a Solar Guard rocket cruiser. 3 men who could be taught to think, feel, and act as one intelligent brain. 3 men who would respect each other and who would depend on each other. Tomorrow you begin your real education. You will be supervised and instructed personally. Many men have contributed to the knowledge that will be placed in front of you. Brave, intelligent men who blasted through the atmosphere with a piece of metal under them for a spaceship and a fire in their tail for rockets. But everything they accomplish goes to waste if this unit can't be a single personality. It must be a single personality or it doesn't exist. The unit is the ultimate of hundreds of years of research and progress, but you have to fight to create it and keep it living. Either you want it or you get out of the academy. Captain Strong turned away momentarily, and Tom and Astro looked at Roger significantly. Stand to! The three boys snapped to attention as the wide-shouldered captain addressed them again. Tomorrow you begin to learn to think as a single brain, to act with combined intelligence as one person. You either make up your minds to start tomorrow, or you report to Commander Walters and resign. There isn't any room here for individuals. He stepped to the door and paused. One more thing. I've been given the job of making you over into spacemen. I'm your unit commander. If you're still here in the morning, I'll accept that as your answer. If you think you can't take, he paused, what I'm going to dish out, then you know what you can do. And if you stay, you'll be the best unit, or I'll break you in two in the attempt. Unit dismissed. And he was gone. The three cadets stood still, not knowing quite what to do or say. Finally, Tom stepped before Astro and Roger. Well, he said quietly, how about it, you guys? Are you going to lay off each other now? Astro flushed, but Roger eyed Corbett coolly. Were you really taken in by that space gas, Tom? He turned to the shower room. If you were, you're even more childish than I thought. A man died to save another man's life, Roger. Sam Jones. I never knew him, but I've met Captain Strong, and I believe that he would have done the same thing for Jones. Very noble, commented Roger from the doorway. But I'll tell you this, Manning, said Tom, following him, fighting for self-control. I wouldn't want to have to depend on you to save my life, and I wouldn't want to be faced with a situation where I would have to sacrifice mine to save yours. The Academy regs say the man on control deck is boss of the unit, but I have my private opinion of the man who has that job now. What's that supposed to mean? Asked Tom. Just this, space boy. There's a gym below where I'll take you and your big friend on, together or one at a time. He paused, a cold smile twisting his lips. And that offer is good as of right now. Tom and Astro looked at each other. I'm afraid, began Astro slowly, that you wouldn't stand much of a chance with me, Manning. So if Tom wants a chance of buttoning your lip, he's welcome to it. Thanks, Astro, said Tom evenly. It'll be my pleasure. Without another word, the three cadets walked out of the door. End of Chapter 4. Stand By for Mars by Carey Rockwell. Chapter 5. Will this do, Manning? Asked Tom. The three boys were in a secluded corner of the gym, a large hall on the 14th floor of the dormitory building. At the far end of the gym, a group of cadets had just finished a game of mercury ball and were sauntering to the showers. When the last boy had disappeared, the floor was deserted except for Tom, Roger, and Astro. This will do fine, Corbett, said Roger. The boxing ring had been taken down the week before to make room for the drills and physical exercises of the earthworms, so the three boys had to improvise a ring. They dragged 4 large tumbling mats together, spreading them side by side to form a square close to the size of an actual ring. Astro went to one of the small lockers under the balcony and returned with 2 pairs of boxing gloves. Here, offered Astro. Put these on. Gloves? Asked Roger in a voice of mock surprise. I thought this was going to be a battle of blood. Any way you want it, Manning. Any way at all. You're going to use gloves, growled Astro. I don't want anybody killed. He threw a pair at each of them. It'll be 3-minute rounds, with 1 minute rest, he continued. Go off mats and you'll be counted out. Usual rules otherwise. Any questions? Clear to me, Astro, said Tom. Let's go, nodded Roger. One more thing, said Astro. I hope Tom pins your ears back, Manning, but I'm going to see that both of you get a fair deal. So keep the punches up and fight it out. All right? Time! The 2 boys moved carefully to the center of the improvised ring, their guards up, while Astro stood off the edge of the mat and watched a sweeping second hand of his wrist chronograph. Shuffling forward, Tom pushed out a probing left and tried to cross his right, but Manning stepped back easily, countering with a hard left to Tom's heart. I forgot to tell you, Corbett, he called out. I'm considered a counterpuncher. He was cut off with a sharp left of the face and snapped his head back, and his lips curled up in a smile of condescension. Good. Very good, Corbett. Then, with lightning speed and grace of a cat, Roger slipped inside Tom's guard, punching hard and true. A left, a right, and a left pounded into Tom's midsection, and as he gave way momentarily, Tom's face clouded over. They circled. Tom kept leading with sharp lefts that popped in and out like a piston, always connecting and keeping Roger off balance. Roger concentrated on penetrating Tom's defense, methodically pounding on his ribs and heart, trying to wear him down. Time, bawled Astro. The 2 boys dropped their hands and turned back to their corners. They squatted on the floor, breathing slowly and easily. Astro stood in the middle of the ring, glaring at both of them in turn and shaking his head. Huh. I expect to see you 2 try to wallop each other in meteor dust. Keep fighting like that and we'll be here all night. Talk to Corbett, sneered Roger. Looks like he's afraid to mix it up. You fight your way, Roger, and I'll fight mine, replied Tom, his voice cold and impersonal. Time, suddenly yelled Astro and stepped back off the mat. The two cadets jumped to their feet and met in the center of the ring again. With a bull-like rush, Roger changed tactics and began to rain punches all over Tom's body, but the curly-haired cadet stood his ground coolly, picking some off in midair with his gloves and sliding under the others. Then, as Roger slowed down, Tom took the offensive, popping his left into his opponent's face, steadily and methodically, while keeping his right cocked for a clear opening to the chin. Roger danced in and out, watching Tom's left as though it was a snake and trying unsuccessfully to get through his guard. But the sharp lefts kept snapping his head back, and his face began to redden, not only from the sting of the blows, but with the mounting fury of his frustration. Suddenly, as Astro raised his arms to call time for the end of the round, Roger jumped forward and rained another series of harmless blows on Tom's shoulders and arms. But then the big Venusian called time, he stepped back and Tom dropped his guard. Instantly, Roger threw a right with all his weight behind it. It landed flush on Tom's jaw and he dropped, sprawling full length on the mats and lying still. Smiling, Roger sauntered to his corner while Astro charged in and bent over the fallen cadet. "None of that, Astro," snapped Roger. "Since when does a referee take sides? Leave him alone. If he doesn't come out for the next round, you have to count him out." The big Venusian straightened and walked menacingly towards Roger's corner. "You hit him after I called time," he drawled. "So I have to take you on too, huh?" Roger jumped to his feet. "Alright, come on, you big blast of space gas." "Wait, Astro, wait!" Astro suddenly wheeled around to see Tom shaking his head weakly and trying to rise up on his elbows. He rushed back to the fallen boy's side. Roger shouted at him angrily, "Leave him alone!" "Ah, go blow your jets," was Astro's snarling reply as he bent over Tom, who was now sitting up. "Tom, are you okay?" "Yeah," he replied weakly. "Stay out of this. You're the referee." "How much time left?" 20 seconds, said Astro. "Roger smacked you after I called time." "If he did, I didn't know a thing about it. I was out." Tom managed a cold smile. "Nice punch, Roger." 10 seconds, said Astro, stepping back off the mat. "Thanks for the compliment, Corbett." Roger eyed the other cadet speculatively. "But are you sure you want to go on?" "I was saved by the bell, wasn't I?" "Yeah, sure. But if you'd rather quit..." "Time!" cried Astro. Tom rose to his feet, shook his head, and brought up his hands. It wasn't a moment too soon. Roger had rushed across the mat, trying to land another murderous right. Tom brought up his shoulder just in time, slipping with a punch, and at the same time bringing up a terrific left to Roger's midsection. Manning let out a grunt and clinched. Tom pursued his advantage, pumping rights and lefts into the body, and he could feel the arrogant cadet weakening. Suddenly, Roger crowded in close, wrestling Tom around so that Astro was on the opposite side of the mat, then brought his head under Tom's chin. The pop of Tom's teeth could be heard all over the great hall. Roger quickly stepped back and backpedaled until Astro called time. "Thanks for teaching me that one, Roger. Learned 2 tricks from you today," said Tom, breathing heavily, but with the same cold smile on his face. "That's all right, Corbett. Anytime," said Manning. "What tricks?" asked Astro. He looked suspiciously at Manning, who was doubled over, finding it hard to breathe. "Nothing I can't handle in time," said Tom, looking at Roger. "Time," called Astro and stepped off the mat. The two boys got to their feet slowly. The pace was beginning to show on them, and they boxed carefully. The boys were perfectly matched, Tom constantly snapping Roger's head back with the jolting left jabs and following to the head or heart with a right cross, and Roger counterpunching, slipping hooks and body punches in under Tom's long leads. It was a savage fight. The 3 weeks of hard physical training had conditioned the boys perfectly. At the end of the 12th round, both boys showed many signs of wear. Roger's cheeks were as red as the glow of a jet blast deflector from the hundreds of lefts Tom had pumped into his face, while Tom's ribs and midsection were bruised and raw where Roger's punches had landed successfully. It couldn't last much longer, thought Astro, as he called time for the beginning of the 13th round. Roger quickened his pace, dancing in and out, trying to move in under Tom's lefts. But suddenly Tom caught him with a right hand that was cocked and ready. It staggered him and he fell back, covering up. Tom pressed his advantage, showering rights and lefts everywhere he could find an opening. In desperation, his knees buckling, Roger clinched tightly, quickly brought up his open glove and gouged his thumb into Tom's eyes. Tom pulled back instinctively, pawing at his eye with his right glove. Roger, spotting the opening, immediately took advantage of it, shooting a hard, looping right that landed flush in Tom's jaw. Tom went down. Unaware of Roger's tactics, Astro jumped into the ring and his arm pumped the deadly count. 1, 2, 3, 4. It was going to be tough if Roger won, Astro thought as he counted. 5, 6. Arrogant enough now, he would be impossible to live with. 7, 8. Tom struggled up to a sitting position and stared angrily at his opponent in the far corner. 9. With one convulsive effort, Tom regained his feet. His left eye was closed and swollen, his right bleary with fatigue. He wobbled drunkenly to his feet, but he pressed forward. This was one fight he had to win. Roger moved in for the finish. He slammed a left into Tom's shell, trying to find an opening for the last finishing blow. But Tom remained in the shell, forearms picking up the smashes that even hurt his arms, as he waited for the strength to return to his legs and arms and his head to clear. He knew he couldn't go another round. He wouldn't be able to see. It would have to be this round, and he had to beat Roger. Not because he wanted to, but because Roger was a member of the unit, and he had to keep the unit together. He circled his unit mate with care, shielding himself from the shower of rights and lefts that rained around him. He waited with one perfect opening. "Come on, open up and fight, Corbett," panted Roger. Tom snapped his right in reply. He noticed that Roger moved in with the hook every time he tried to cross his right. He waited. His legs began to shake. Roger circled and Tom shot out his left again, dropping into a semi-crouch and feinted with his right cross. Roger moved in, cocking his fist for the left hook, and Tom was ready for him. He threw to the right, threw with every ounce of strength left in his body. Roger was caught moving in and took the blow flush on the chin. He stopped as if poleaxed. His eyes turned glassy, and then he dropped to the mat. He was out cold. Astro didn't even bother to count. Tom squatted on the mat beside Roger and rubbed the blonde head with his glove. "Get some water, Astro," he said, gasping for breath. "I'm glad I don't have to fight this guy again. And I'll tell you something else." "What?" asked Astro. "Anybody that wants to win as much as this guy does is going to win, and I want him on my side." Astro merely grunted and turned towards the water cooler. "Maybe," he called back, "but he ought to read a book of rules first." When he came back to the mat with the water, Roger was sitting up, fighting knots of laces on his gloves. Tom helped him, and when the soggy leather was finally discarded, he stuck out his hand. "Well, Roger, I'm ready to forget everything we said and start over again." Roger looked at the extended hand for a moment, his eyes blank and expressionless. Then, with a quick movement, he slapped it away and lurched to his feet. "Go blow your jets," he snarled, then turning his back on them, stumbled across the gym. Tom watched him go, bewilderment and pain mirrored on his face. "I thought for sure this would work, Astro," he sighed. "I thought he'd come to his senses if—" "Nothing will make that space creep come to his senses." Astro broke in disgustedly. "At least nothing short of an atomic warhead. Come on, let's get you cleaned up." Putting his arm around Tom's shoulder, the big Venusian led him across the floor of the deserted gym. And as they disappeared through the automatic sliding door, a tall figure in the uniform of the Solar Guard stepped out of the shadows of the balcony above. It was Captain Strong. He stood silently at the rail, looking down at the mats and the soggy, discarded boxing gloves. Tom had won the fight, he thought, but he'd lost the war. The unit was now farther apart than it had ever been. End of Chapter 5.